Tobacco companies are notoriously known for using some of the most outrageous promotional tactics to sell their cigarettes. But by far their most controversial ploy was using doctors to promote their products. Between the 1930s and 1950s, thousands upon thousands of radio ads, print ads, and commercials were made featuring medical professionals claiming that cigarettes weren't harmful, but actually beneficial to your health. Hearing this raises a few questions. What companies were behind these ads? How did these companies convince doctors not only to approve of these wild health claims, but also be featured in the ads? And most importantly, how did these companies get away with it for so long? To answer these questions, we need to take a look at 3 tobacco companies in particular. The first of which is American Tobacco. American Tobacco, the makers of Lucky Strike cigarettes, are credited for being the first company to feature doctors in their advertisements. But why did they use doctors in the first place? Well, in the 1930s, smoking was the norm among both men and women in the US, and even the majority of doctors smoked. But at the same time, there was a rising public anxiety about the health risks of cigarettes thanks to an alarming increase in lung cancer among the general public. However, at the time, there was no clinical evidence that proved smoking was the cause of this rise, which in turn allowed tobacco companies like American Tobacco to devise a sneaky plan to ease the public. And that plan was to recruit doctors for their marketing efforts to calm the public's fear of smoking being linked to cancer. Here's an example. In one of their ads, American Tobacco claims that over 20,000 physicians say Luckies are less irritating and that they protect your throat against irritation and coughing. These claims are, of course, complemented with a smiling doctor seemingly approving of what is being said in the ad. Nowadays, claims like these are ridiculous, but back then they were accepted as fact. So how did American Tobacco get away with claims like these? Well, the answer gives a fantastic insight into just how corrupt and misleading these doctor cigarette ads were. In the late 1920s, American Tobacco's president, George Washington Hill, was brainstorming ways to develop a reason why consumers should purchase Lucky cigarettes. With the ongoing public concern about the potential health effects of cigarette smoking, he knew he wanted to use some sort of medical claim to show that their cigarettes weren't harmful to the body. And so, with no real scientific evidence to back his claim, George insisted that the toasting process that Lucky cigarettes underwent decreased throat irritation. To prove this claim, American Tobacco's ad agency sent thousands of free cartons of cigs to physicians and asked them to answer one question: are Lucky cigarettes less irritating to sensitive and tender throats than other cigarettes? And so, with receiving a free pack of cigs and only having to answer one simple question, 20,679 of those doctors said yes. And well, that was enough evidence for American Tobacco. Without performing any other in-depth tests to back up their claim, American Tobacco went on to produce thousands of ads saying that physicians approved of their claim that smoking Lucky cigarettes actually benefited your throat and lungs. These ridiculous print ads were praised by the public and did in fact ease their fears of smoking being related to lung cancer. And because of these ad success, other tobacco companies took notice. One of which was Philip Morris. Today, Philip Morris is one of the biggest tobacco companies in the world. But in the mid-1930s, they were just a newcomer to the market. Looking for ways to expand their business, Philip Morris saw how much success American Tobacco was having with their medical-driven marketing strategy. So they decided to pursue the same plan. They started producing magazine ads that featured proven findings from doctors claiming that Philip Morris cigarettes also helped clear up irritation in the throat. For example, this 1937 ad claims that a report on the findings of a group of doctors found that when smokers changed to Philip Morris, every case of irritation cleared completely or definitely improved. But in reality, this claim was completely bogus, and the way Philip Morris manipulated doctors into agreeing with them is shocking. In the same fashion that American Tobacco won over doctors with free packs of cigarettes, Philip Morris was on the hunt to recruit physicians to get them on their side. But they put in much more effort to win them over. Representatives of Philip Morris would attend medical conventions year-round and set up exhibits where doctors could not only get unlimited free cigarettes, but also lounge around in comfortable couches and socialize with each other. Hundreds of doctors at these conventions would line up to receive their free cigarettes and talk to these representatives about doing research for Philip Morris. Now, of course, this entire ploy was a clear example that Philip Morris was trying to appeal to physicians and that they didn't really care about the medical symptoms of cigarette smoking. But Their plan worked flawlessly. Their success in recruiting doctors gave them the ability to publish their ads in official medical journals, which was a huge win when it came to convincing the public that their products were healthy. But what would Philip Morris claim is healthy about their products? Well, a lot of their claims consisted of what was shown previously. Philip Morris cigarettes apparently cause less irritation to the throat and lungs. But as you may have guessed, the doctors, who are now essentially workers for Philip Morris, based these claims on some very sketchy testing. The main source of these claims was based on Philip Morris adding a chemical to their products called diethylene glycol, a chemical that apparently made their cigs more moist and less irritating than any other brand. The research behind this chemical, in which Philip Morris sponsored, was conducted by injecting the chemical into the eyes of rabbits and noticing the difference in irritation. This uncanny study apparently proved that the chemical caused less irritation, and even though researchers not sponsored by Philip Morris disputed these findings, the study became the centerpiece of hundreds of Philip Morris ads in magazines, on the radio, and of course in medical journals. With them now boldly claiming their cigarettes were healthy, Philip Morris quickly became a major brand for the first time ever. But their involvement in the medical world wouldn't stop there. For example, throughout the 30s, the Great Depression was causing medical organizations to lose millions of dollars. But thanks to funding from Philip Morris, these organizations were able to stay afloat, with the exception that Philip Morris was able to continue printing their inaccurate advertisements in medical journals. As a matter of fact, Philip Morris was so deeply involved in the medical world that their propaganda convinced doctors to suggest to their patients who were suffering from coughs and other symptoms to smoke Philip Morris cigarettes, claiming that their cigarettes were less irritating than other brands. After hearing all of this, you'd probably think these ads couldn't get much worse in terms of manipulation and fraud. But it does. That's because a company called RJ Reynolds took this strategy a step further and created the most notorious medical marketing campaign of all time. In the 1940s, RJ Reynolds, most famously known for their Camel cigarettes, wanted to get a piece of the medical marketing success these other tobacco companies were having. However, they did so through a completely different approach, one that manipulated and romanticized the public's image of doctors to their advantage. RJ Reynolds created a campaign called More Doctors, a campaign that claimed that all doctors preferred Camel cigarettes over any other brand. According to RJ Reynolds, they conducted surveys nationwide and asked doctors from every branch of medicine what brand of cigarette they preferred. While this claim in itself is questionable, the main concern is that they asked these doctors what their preferred brand was shortly after giving them a free pack of Camel cigarettes, which of course makes the claim that all of these doctors preferred them completely biased and illegitimate. But regardless of knowing their wrongdoing, they proceeded to print thousands of advertisements centered around these false findings for over 6 years, and no one questioned anything about them. And so, when the 1950s rolled around, these three companies and many more were enjoying exponential growth and sitting on millions of dollars in profit, all thanks to their extortion of the medical world. However, their sleazy marketing tactics wouldn't last much longer. By the mid-1950s, there was plentiful legitimate research available that undoubtedly proved that cigarettes were linked to many harmful diseases. These findings completely wiped out the trust the public had in tobacco companies, and medical institutions across the US proceeded to reject any further funding provided from those companies moving forward. And so, in 1954, the last tobacco ad featuring a doctor was printed. And from there on out, the industry as a whole never used physicians in their ads ever again. But that didn't stop tobacco companies from advertising in mistrustful ways. For example, check out this video of mine where I dive into the suspicious history of Marlboro advertising in F1.